And listen, much like the original Netflix series, the sequel is beautifully animated and choreographed. It's probably even more gorgeous than the original. And I do not say that lightly, especially since the first series is one of the best animated shows of the last few years. Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class in the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon, where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. Enjoy the video. And we're going to move on to the next part, the final part of my show today. And that is my review for Castlevania Nocturne. And for those that need a little background, a little synopsis, a sequel series to Netflix's original Castlevania, and partially inspired by the events of Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night, the video games, the two Castlevania video games. Nocturne is set during the French Revolution and follows Richter Belmont, the descendant of Trevor Belmont and Sypha Belonades, as he and his allies battle a would-be vampire god and her forces. I do want to share my overall thoughts and opinions on the Castlevania franchise, the games, and also the Netflix series. I grew up playing the Castlevania games back in the day, chat, certainly in the late 90s and the early 2000s. I used to play them all the time. My two favorites were always Castlevania 3, which actually follows Trevor Belmont. It's what actually inspired the Castlevania Netflix series. Dracula's Curse was the subtitle of the game. And obviously Symphony of the Night, which was also one of the big inspirations for the Netflix series. Love those two games. Just for the aesthetics, obviously, chat, the music, the gameplay. The Castlevania games, obviously, while they nailed all those aspects, they were never really about, story. They had maybe a couple little story moments in between, all the action. But you were there for the moment-to-moment gameplay. You were there for the designs. You were there for the music. That's why people loved Castlevania. It helped, inspire the Metroidvania genre along with the Super Metroid series. It's a very important game. It's a very important series in the history of video games, and inspired what I consider to be one of its absolute best genres, one of its best subgenres. And so I never was really a fan of the 3D era of Castlevania. I think I played one of those original games, and I was like, I don't like this at all. Didn't care for that one bit. And I know they did a sequel. I forget what those are even called. I think that's where he actually played as Dracula. But they may have their fans. It just wasn't for me. And then Konami, typical Konami, they've slept on that license for years. Not really doing any truly new Castlevania games. Occasionally doing re-releases, remasters, quote unquote. I don't know if even some of those were true remasters, to whatever degree that they were. But you have gotten a lot of games that obviously were very inspired by Castlevania, and people that grew up loving those, much like I did, chat. Some great stuff out there, no doubt. And so when it was announced that Netflix was going to be doing an anime adaptation of the games, I was like, okay. I was curious about that, but also a little concerned. One, because there was just so many terrible video game adaptations for years. There's certainly more bad video game adaptations than good, and certainly during that time before the show came out. I think the one that everyone pointed to before Castlevania was the 1995's Mortal Kombat, which, still, I think you make an argument as one of the better video game adaptations. But at that time period, chat, from 1995 to whenever the series originally came out, 2019? I want to say Castlevania came out in 2019. That was it, And so it wasn't great. But then they did that first season. Of course, it was A.D. Shankar produced it, of course. And it was only, I think, 4 episodes. You can even tell that Netflix is like, all right, we don't know what's going to happen with this. We don't know how popular it's going to be. So let's just do these 4 episodes and see what happens. And I watched it. I was blown away. I couldn't believe. I don't think I had any idea what they were truly working on, what they were going to do. And because the thing is, like watching that show, like immediately, I think I was taken aback by how gorgeous it looked, by how beautiful it was, and the colors and the character designs and just the backgrounds and like how everything was moving in this. I was like, I just didn't expect that at all. And the other thing I didn't expect was because I was like, well, the Castlevania games, as much as I love them, they're not really about the story of the characters. Like, they're there, but they're tertiary. What they did was they like, okay, we took all the aesthetics, we take the world, build up that world, but we are just going to focus so much on providing personality and characterization and telling this epic, dark, fantastical tale. And they expanded the lore in a really nice, healthy, loving way. And I just did not expect that at all. And like giving so much context for Dracula and his relationship with his wife and Alucard and Richter Belmont and Symphony and this rich tapestry of supporting and tertiary characters and the dialogue that was written, just the introspective, meditative, personal dialogue that was written for so many of these people. I couldn't believe this. And then, of course, it was quickly greenlit for season 2. They doubled the episodes. Season 2 was amazing. And then did season 3, which I like season 3, but I think it's the weakest of the seasons. That's when they were like, that's when they took their time. And then season 4, I thought was a home run. I thought that season was fantastic and a great way to end the show. And, I've said this many times before. I think Castlevania, alongside Arcane, they are the 2 best video game adaptations that we've ever gotten. Those two, to me, are head and shoulders next to each other. They are the kings. They are the queens, if you will. And it's what every video game adaptation, certainly animated or long form, like for television, should look at as a template. I mean, really anything. It doesn't even have the movie. It's like, look at the respect that they paid to those games, but also expanded on it in a really positive way. And so I love Netflix's Castlevania. They did such a great job. Even season 3, which I don't think was as good as those previous, the previous 2 seasons or season 4, but still, I mean, blew anything else out of the water at the time, and probably till this day. There's no question. And so I was always a huge fan, right? And so when they announced Castlevania Nocturne, I was like, oh shit, here we go. And those trailers, chat, looked awesome. I was like, okay, you're gonna be taking from Rondo of Blood, you're taking more from Symphony of the Night. It's like, okay, let's go. And listen, much like the original Netflix series, the sequel is beautifully animated and choreographed. It's probably even more gorgeous than the original. And I do not say that lightly, especially since the first series is one of the best animated shows of the last few years. The color palette in this particular show is just a rich tapestry of blues and yellows and greens, and especially blood red. Much like its predecessors, the show is extremely bloody, gory, and violent. People's bodies are stabbed, sliced, and diced, eviscerated, and exploded every single episode. It's just a cacophony of bloody animated violence. And it might even be a little overwhelming for viewers who are a bit squeamish when it comes to that sort of thing. The character designs are also spectacular. You have characters richly adorned in the fashions of that time period. Half the cast looks like a dandy in this, like a French dandy, wearing their French silks and everything, right? And their frills and stuff. I just noticed that. I was like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of dandies in here. I thought that was very funny. But you also have a mixture of fashions and designs from the Caribbean, Mesoamerica, and even Russian cultures, like Baltic cultures and Eastern European and Central European cultures. And I love how all the designs kind of blend together, especially when we see, consistent vampiric and monstrous transformations throughout the entire show, throughout the 8 episodes. Now, they say that this series is based off of Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. But at this point, I would argue it's a very, very, very loose adaptation. And it's more like it's borrowing the aesthetics of those games than anything, than the plots. Those characters from those games, sure. But at this point, it's like we're just kind of taking the aesthetics overall. You know, there are a number of new characters I do really like, especially when it comes to the villains. You know, there are a number of standouts for me, two particular standouts, and I think they're my favorite characters in the show. I think the best character in the show so far is this character named Olrox, who originally is a boss from Symphony of the Night. Here, they change him up a bit. You know, he's an Aztec vampire who has like a deep connection to Richter Belmont and the Belmont clan, the Belmont family. You know, all the villains, of all the villains in the show, he's given the most characterization. You know, we learn a lot about his past, you know, his motivations and sense of morality. You know, he's a complicated character. He's a complicated villain. He's not evil for the sake of being evil. He's not evil because, well, I'm a vampire, I'm going to eat people. He's more than just that. And he's just charming, and he's intelligent, and he's thoughtful. The voice actor is Zahn McLannon. If I'm mispronouncing, let me know. But the voice actor is Zahn McLannon, and he does a terrific job voicing him. And he's always the one people I feel like will gravitate the most to when he's featured in an episode, and certainly in a scene. You know, you don't always know what he's thinking about or going to do, and that's what makes him a bit of a wild card. And he's just a very interesting, you know, wild card at that. He's the character that I was like, who is this guy? You know, he just stood out, I think, among everybody else, both the villains and the heroes, in my personal opinion. We also have the character of Drolta, who's pretty much the second in command of the would-be vampire god Messiah. And she just oozes personality, is constantly intimidating. And I'm sorry, chat, but she is thick as fuck. She is a far departure from her video game counterpart, who is depicted as this disgusting hag, this old woman. Here, her outfits stand out as much as her personality. She's a strategist and a tactician, and will use her assets to distract anyone when negotiating with them. Alars, I don't know how to say this voice actress's name. Alarcia Johnson voices her, and I feel like she does a terrific job with the character. Just you look at her design, it's amazing, chat. She's this black vampire, but she has this like combination like black brownish hair, but she has like all these purple accents, or excuse me, these pink accents in her hair and her costuming. And I don't know, she immediately stands out among like everybody else. But yeah, her personality is fantastic. I mean, they're not shy about showing off her body in this. And even I'm going like, my God, thick as fuck. That's all I'll say, chat. But a beautiful design. And I think one of the standout characters outside of Olrox, who I already mentioned. Now the thing is, I think the rest of the cast is kind of a mixed bag. I'm mixed on them. You know, we have Richter Belmont in this, you know, and he again is you know, the great grandson of Trevor and, you know, and Sypha. And I don't know what to expect. I didn't know what I wanted from him, but I kind of I didn't want Trevor Belmont again, because that's pretty much what he is. He's just Trevor Belmont. He just kind of feels like a lesser Trevor Belmont. And I'm thinking like, well, you know what? Probably the thing that they could have done. It's not what they could have done. No, it's not. I don't want to judge the series on what they could have done. I can only judge on what they did. But I feel like just doing Trevor again was a mistake. I think it would have been actually more interesting had they had him be distinctly different in personality and just in cadence, like every aspect to Trevor. He's just so similar to that character that I'm just like, well, okay, you're Trevor, but you're not Trevor. And so it's like, okay. I kind of wanted more from him. You know, there's a thing. He has a tragic part of his past that is affecting him throughout the rest of the series. You know, a bit of childhood trauma, you know, which certainly had an impact on his character and formed the way he is, you know, throughout the rest of the show. But just everything about him, he just felt like Trevor again. And I mean, they do some great stuff with him, some really cool, imaginative, beautiful choreography and fight sequences, and the animation on him is great. And I like the blue, like blue is his primary color, and I like how that's used in the episodes. And certainly his fight scenes, a lot of blue flame, right? But yeah, in terms of his character, I kind of found him like, you're just the same guy I saw before. And I love Trevor Belmont. I really did like him quite a bit. You know, he's great. I love so much personality. But I don't know. I wanted something other than Trevor Belmont again. It's like, give me another Belmont, but like have them be different. I think that would have been more exciting. And I was like, nothing really here. We're going to just do another character called Maria Renard, who is in a way Trevor Belmont's sister. You know, he's you know, basically he's an orphan in the show, and he ends up with this family. He had connections with his family, and you know, this character of Maria is Renard is kind of like they have a sister brother relationship, even though they're not, you know, blood related, right? And you know, she is this young budding revolutionary, you know, during the French Revolution. And she's like a magician, you know, who is trained by her mother, who's from Russia, and like she has control of like a lot of animals. Like she has control over all these like kind of magic birds and hawks and falcons, tigers, like these magical looking tiger creatures, and even like a snapping turtle. It's like kind of cool what they do with her powers and everything. She's like this kind of outfit that doesn't match her personality at all, where she's kind of like, you know, very, you know, just like, you know, she's opinionated and she wants you to know her opinion. And they kind of put her in this like kind of pink frilly dress, which just doesn't really the match like her personality, which is kind of weird to me. But it's like, okay, kind of contradicting, stands out, I suppose. But her motivations are kind of weird because, you know, she is very much, I mean, she's pro-revolution, and she's always here's the thing. She's always talking about how poor her and her mom are, how poor all the people are in her community and everything. You know, it's like, oh, well, of course. I mean, I guess, you know, because, you know, the aristocracy, they you know, they hoarded all their wealth for them, and they bankrupted the country, etc. But the thing is, like, what she's saying is not matching the world that they're showing me. Because in the world, it's like, we go to the town that she lives in, and it's great. It's, like, super clean. Like, it's like the you can eat food off those cobblestone streets, you know, in the show. It's like everything's clean and looks really nice. Like everything's scrubbed down. The peasants, quote unquote, the citizens are all looking healthy. And even like when you go to her house, where it's like, my mother was starving, we go to her house and the house is amazing. It's like this is perfect. Like they live, I'm probably using magic, but then you're saying that you're starving, but then I go and you have a house filled with food and drink and everything, and it's warm, and I'm just like, why? I'm not saying like, well, of course in the French Revolution, all these peasants, all these people were like suffered because of the aristocracy and the monarchy, but they don't show it in the show at all. And I found that very unusual. That was kind of weird, and so she's kind of contradicting herself. It's just, what are you talking about? Like, everything else looks great here. So that was weird, because it's doubly weird because in the original show, when we're in Wallachia, right? We're in Wallachia, which is the fictional country in Castlevania. But we're in that country. It's like the shittiest place to live. Everyone's poor. Everything is covered in shit and piss. They tell you everything's covered in shit and piss, and it smells like it's covered in shit and piss. And then we go here, it's like everything looks great. And so it's like, why didn't you just have that over here? Because I'm sure during the French Revolution, Chad, if you go across all these cities, I'm sure a lot of things were covered in shit and piss, and a lot of people lived in horrible conditions. And so it's just kind of odd that everything is like beautiful and multicolored, like the environments, and everyone seems healthy. It's like, what are you talking about? And so that was odd to me. That didn't make a lot of sense, like, at all. There was it's almost like the writing for her character didn't match the world in which we're being presented with. And again, I think the voice actors for both of them, both for Richter and Maria, are great, but I think the writing underserved both of them. We're also introduced to the character of Annette, who is originally from Rondo of Blood, and she is a far departure from her source material. And I think probably the thing that people are upset about, that's controversial. But the thing is, like, her even though she is a far departure from her source material, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. In the original game, she's kind of like a damsel in distress. That's what she is. She's the significant other, paramour of Richter Belmont. Here, very different. She is a escaped slave, free slave, from a Caribbean plantation. who, along with many other escaped slaves, staged a revolt against her. By the way, vampires, chat, vampires are slave owners. In this, they're slave owners now. It's like, it's not even the white man. Well, it's white vampires. So some of them. There's also a lot of black vampires in this. And they're like, whatever, slavery, whatever. It's them. I'm a black vampire. You know, I'm higher in the hierarchy, whatever. But she stages this revolt along with another character named Edward, who I want to talk about in a second. And then we spend like an episode and a half focusing on that. And I thought this, you know what? Honestly, I thought this is actually pretty good. I actually thought, like, okay, this is definitely a far departure from her character in the games, but like whatever. She's a nothing character in those games. And you want to kind of see what, you know, because we also get a sense of like, okay, how the vampirism in the New World and how they've kind of affected the culture in the United States or the colonies initially, but then also in the Caribbean. And I actually liked that quite a bit. And I liked her character. The thing is that I did not like, and I'm like, don't do this, is like when she's introduced to the characters that we've been following, she kind of comes across very dismissive of them. And I'm like, you don't do that. Like she kind of treats them like they're idiots. And they don't know what they're doing. And she kind of like refers to them as, like I said, as children or even as cowards. I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if, like, why they're trying to like create this kind of faux conflict between her and the characters initially, but it kind of came across as disingenuous to me. And so I feel like they underserved her in that regard, especially because I actually liked what they were doing with her initially, but that was weird. And then she kind of comes, but then inevitably she comes back around. It's like, I'm sorry that I kind of called you children, a bunch of jabronis, and I said you're cowards. You know, I actually see that you do care. It's like, well, they always cared. And so that was weird. Again, that's the fault of the writers. Not of the voice, obviously not the voice actors, of course. But that was weird. I didn't understand that. Why they had to have her be like, you guys suck. It's like, don't do that. She has a companion character named Edward, who is voiced by, I want to shout out this voice actor, Sidney James Harcourt. And Edward, he was also one of the, he wasn't an escaped slave, but he was half black, half white. And they say in the show mulatto. They say he's a mulatto. I know it's not a kind term, but that is what he's referred to in the context of the show. And he was not raised a slave, I believe, but you know he observed slavery, and he's an entertainer. He is a musician and a singer, and he obviously is invested in the freedom of the slave. And he's part of like this kind of like underground railroad type movement. That, you know, results in Annette being freed and many of her people being freed. I don't want to say too much what happens to him in the show, but what they introduce with him, I think, is very interesting. And his voice acting, I want to know, like, he sings a lot in this show, and I am very, very curious if this actor, James Harcourt, is Sidney James Harcourt, is doing the songs. Because if he is, holy shit, man. Very impressive. Very, very impressive. I was blown away by the singing and the beautiful, just, you know, heart-wrenching songs that I think just added so much to whichever scene they were featured in. Whether it was a character, someone else dying, or a battle scene, it complemented whatever was happening physically very, very well. And I was very impressed with his performance. And so if that's him singing, then great. I mean, even if it's not, even if they brought another guy, both of them, fantastic. But if that is him, oh, Jesus, very impressive. I had to be careful. So there's another character introduced later on in this show that is not the marketing at all. All I'll say is they are voiced by Ian Glenn. Which, for those that don't know, Ian Glenn, he's probably best known for playing Lord Friendzone, Sir Friendzone from Game of Thrones. God, what's his? I just know him as Sir Friendzone. I don't know what his name is. Jorah Mormont. That's who he played in the show. The one who was always hanging out with Daenerys Targaryen, just lusted after her totally, you know, throughout that entire series, lying to her. He voices a character here. I don't want to say who it is because it's a big reveal. All I'll say is he's fucking awesome. He's actually, like, really cool. And almost, I kind of would have wanted to follow him instead of Richter Belmont as the main character, because I feel like there's more interesting things hinted at about his past than Richter. But all I'll say is he does great work. I was very impressed. He's only in maybe 2 or 3 episodes, but he's fantastic. Really, really loved him. And the thing is, it's so funny. Like the show, like I'm always about, hey, show me, don't tell me. All right? That's kind of the rule. Like, don't tell me that this happened. Show me that it happened. And they mostly do that. But with him, they actually have it where he's just telling, but you're just so convinced by his voice acting, you just kind of go along with it. You're like, hell yeah, man, this is awesome. So very impressed of what he did as this mystery character, which I guys want you to see for yourselves. And you know what? Honestly, like, I think the biggest disappointment of this show so far for me, like I highlighted 2 of the villains. I think 2 of the villains of this show are absolutely great, chat, which, as I said, Olrox, and Drolta. Very different from each other. Wonderful personalities. Really good. But it's the show's main villain that I personally found very lame. I don't know how to say their name. Rabbit Woman Bathory, which is from the games. Bathory, Lady Bathory, Countess Bathory, Sekhmet, as she later turns into the show. She's the would-be vampire messiah, the vampire god. That's what she is. And, you know, we don't really know a lot about her. We get some background, like a little bit. And she, again, but her whole thing is, honestly, chat, she is just dull. And she feels like Dracula without any of the personality, any of the motivation, or any of the interesting history. Like, one of the things that the first season of Castlevania did very well is that it opens with Dracula. It opens with Dracula and his wife, Lisa. And I love that. Like, because I thought, like, because, you know, Dracula's just a bad guy. He's just like, whatever. But here, they provide you so much depth and characterization, and you were kind of like, I get why he wants to kill so many people because of what they did to his wife, burned her at the stake, and even when she was just trying to help. And she brought out that humanity in him. Here, she says, I'm evil. I want to blot out the sun, and everyone's going to eat humans. Yay, me. I'm just like, oh, give me a break. I just, you know, and yeah, she goes through like a Super Saiyan transformation at one point. I'm like, whatever. But that's all she is. See, she is very much as a video game boss. That's all she felt to me. There's no personality to her. There's no motivation. Like she does this one thing that's weird, where she's always sucking on this one girl on her neck, and I'm like, is this gonna turn to something? It's like, doesn't turn to anything. It turns into nothing. And I was very disappointed by this villain. I thought the other villain, I thought her followers, I thought her second in command. Drolta was far more interesting. Personality-wise, plot-wise, certainly, you know, physically. But and Olrox, you know, who is the best of all of them. But yeah, I thought she was so lame. I'm like, oh, God, now we're gonna have to. And of course, they don't defeat her by the end, so she's gonna be the big bad, you know, in the future. But I'm just like, I don't really care. Again, she's a Dracula type enemy, but with none of his personality, none of his charm, none of his motivation, none of his humanity. She's just, I'm bad guy. She even says it. She has a thick Russian accent. She's like a prototypical, like, evil 80s Russian villain. I am bad guy and I will block out sun and we will feast on humans. It's good. Yes, it's very good. It's dobje. I was like, give me a break. And so I found her just completely disappointing and just unnecessary. Now, again, not the voice actor's fault, just writing wise. I was like, yeah, you're lame. You're really lame. So again, there's a lot about the show that I really like. And I think there's a number of characters that really stand out, but there's also some other cast members. There's some other characters that I think are underwritten or just kind of confusing or contradictory to the world in which they're presented in. And so that's a little frustrating. And I think other than, like, you have 2 villains that are absolutely great. It's just funny that those 2 villains are not the main villain, but the main villain just sucks. So yeah, I don't think this. I'm enjoying it. I enjoyed it. I want to watch season 2. I'm very curious to see what they're going to be doing in the future. One thing, I don't want to spoil anything, but all I'll say, I was like, damn, sorry that one character's gone now, because they're far more interesting than a particular character here. But yeah, they got to work out some kinks, I think, for the second season. They're not quite, although animation-wise, I think they're even superior to the first 4 seasons, which is remarkable because the first 4 seasons are beautiful, and there's some great character work being done. But yeah, the world building I think is confusing right now. It's not, some of it's not making any sense to me, and I think there's some characters that are just kind of pale imitations to their original counterparts. You know, like Trevor to Richter. You know, Maria feels like Sypha, but her motivations don't make any sense to me. But you got some amazing characters. Olrox is fantastic. I can't wait to see more with him. He's so good. And like I said, Drolta, I think, is excellent as well. But yeah, chat, that's my thoughts on Castlevania Nocturne. I mean, I'm surprised how kind of mixed I am on it. What about you guys out there? Did you see the show? Did you love it? Did you not? Are you kind of like with me in between where there's things you love and things that you definitely did not like? Let me know. I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.